Good morning, students. I am again back with your second chapter of history, and today, surely, there is a conclusion part. Yesterday, we have seen about the claim to the paramountcy under the Lord Hastings, Governor General, from 1830 to 1823. A new policy that is called as a paramountcy was initiated. Now, the company claimed that its authority was paramount, was supreme. Means what the company thought that whatever the policy they are passing or whatever policy they are launching, that is a supremacy, that is a paramount. So hence its power was greater than that of an Indian state. Means as we have seen yesterday also that all the rulers, all the kings, all the Nawabs, all the Marathas, those who were the kings, they were only a puppet rulers remain, because the Britishers has annexed all their powers, all their responsibility only was there. They have to take care of their people, but no decisive power. They don't have any decisive power in their hand. All the decisions were taken by the British East India Company. So that is the thing which we have seen yesterday, right? Next, when the British tried to annex all the, we have seen that Britishers tried to annex all the small states, state of Kittur in Karnataka today. Today it is there in Karnataka, that's Kittur. Rani Chennamma took to arms and led to the anti-British resistance movement. She was arrested in 1824 and she was put behind the bars, and after a few years she died in the jail itself, right? She died in prison in 1829. But after that, the Rayana, that was the Chowkidar of Rani Chennamma, of Sangli in Kittur, carried on the resistance with the popular support. He destroyed many British camps. He was very obsessive about these things, and so he destroyed many British camps and records. He was caught and hanged by the British in 1830. He was caught by the Britishers, and they put him on the he was been hanged to death in 1830. Next. Next we will see, in the later 1830s, the East India Company became worried about the Russia, right? Russia, and it's imagined that Russia might expand across the Asia and entire India from the northeast. What they thought that Russia might enter from the northwest area in India. Dragged by this fear, the British now wanted to secure their control over the northwest. Now they, again, previously we have seen that British were insecure with the French people. Now here they were again getting insecure with the Russian people, right? They thought that they might enter to India from the northwest. So they wanted to secure their power in India. They don't want anybody else to enter in India and rule and take the chances to rule or trade in India except them, right? So they wanted to, driven by this fear, the British now wanted to secure their control over the northwest also, right? Now next thing, they fought a prolonged war with Afghanistan. Now came the Afghanistan between 1838 and 1842 and established indirect company rule there. Now Sindh was taken over in 1843. Next in line was Punjab. After Afghanistan, Sindh, after Sindh, Punjab was there. But the presence of the Maharaja Ranjit Singh held back the company. As we all know that Ranjit Singh, who was the ruler of the north, that is Punjab and Sindh, right? So he was very strong contender, and he held back the company. After his death, that is in 1839, two prolonged wars were fought with the Sikh kingdom, and ultimately in 1849 Punjab was annexed. Right? Now we will see the doctrine of lapse. Now what is the doctrine of lapse? The final way of annexation occurred under the Lord 1848 to 1856, right? Now, he devised a policy that came to be known as the doctrine of lapse. Now, this policy was known as the doctrine of lapse. Right? Now, the doctrine declared that if an Indian ruler died without a male heir of his kingdom would lapse. That kingdom will automatically lapse. For example, I will give you one example. Your parents might be having a LIC policy, right? You have to continuously pay the premium of that policy, right? But in case if you fail to pay the premium, means your policy will lapse, means it will be no more inactive, right? Means in case anything happens with your policy, whatever the rules and regulations are there for that policy, particular policy, but in case if you are not able to pay for continuous 3 years for that policy, then your policy lapse, means you are not being benefited with all the things which are mentioned in the policy if you are not continuously paying for the 3 years. So that is the same thing happens here. Here also, if a king is not having a male heir, means he is not having any son who may be after his death may be having continuing the kingdom, means continuing the throne, means that person or that kingdom will be directly lapsed, right? That automatically will be transferred, or that will be going to British Empire, that is East India Company, right? The doctrine of declared that if an Indian ruler died without a male heir, his kingdom would lapse, that it becomes a part of a company territory. Automatically it will go to the British East India Company. It will be a part of a British territories, right? Next, one kingdom after another was annexed simply by applying this doctrine. First was Satara in 1848, Sambalpur in 1850, Udaipur in 1852, Nagpur in 1853 and Jhansi in 1854, and finally in 1856 the company also took over the Awadh, right? Now these were the territories which were being annexed simply by applying a doctrine, right? Now next, this time the British had an added argument. They say they were obliged by duty to take over Awadh in order to free the people for misgovernment of a Nawab. Yes, one was the same case, means they don't have any option. So what they told that here they were not having any option, so they told that this territory was because it was been lapsed because due to the misgovernment of the people. So that is what the Nawab, that is basically Nawab, misgovernment of the Nawab. So that is why that region, that territory was being lapsed, and that was being taken away by the British East India Company. Now, angered by the humiliating way in which the Nawab was disposed, the people of Awadh joined the great revolt that broke out in 1857. After looking to this, the people went through the revolt, and they wanted this to that it would not happen, and they started revolting for the same, right? Now next thing we will see the setting up of a new administration. Now Warren Hastings, that was a Governor General from 1773 to 1785, was one of the many important figures who played a significant role in expanding the company power. By his time, the company had acquired power not only in Bengal. As we have seen, when the company they started, at the time Bengal was one of the very much progressive and biggest province, largest province, and economically it was very sound. But also in Bombay and Madras, British territories were broadly divided into administrative units called as the presidencies. Now, slowly and gradually, as it was very difficult to handle, so they divided into presidencies, right? As we all know that we have a we have studied in a civics also that we have a three-tier of a government. Similarly, here it was also very difficult to what you can say govern the things. So they distributed into different provinces. Right now, there were the three presidencies. That was the Bengal, Madras, and Bombay. Right. Each was ruled by the governor. Each and every provinces that is presidencies. Presidencies were being ruled by the governor. Now the supreme head of the administration was the governor. The head of that was called as the Governor General. Warren Hastings, the first Governor General, introduced several administrative reforms, notably in the sphere of the justice. Now from 1772, a new system of a justice was established, and each district was having a two courts, a criminal court that is a Faujdari Adalat and a civil court that is called as a Diwani Adalat. Maulvis and Hindus Pandit interpreted Indian laws for the European district collectors who presided over the civil courts. The criminal courts were still under the Qazi and Mufti, but under the supervision of the collectors, right? We all know that in our country we have a different rules and regulations, laws for different religious. Means the religious, according to the religious aspect, according to the religious theories, the law have been designed. Right. Previously, many with the group of the Maulvis and group of the Pandits, according to their ethical laws, the laws were being designed. So it becomes very easier for the court or for the judges to give the judgment. Previously, because all the religious aspect, all the religious things were not at the same. In Muslim, some laws are different. In Hindus, some laws are different. So accordingly, the whole things were decided with the help of a Maulvis, with the help of a Pandits, right? So as we see that if something happens for some individual religion, then we always say according to the Hindu law, or if something happens with some Muslim community or that whatever the case is, then we always the judge always mention that according to the Muslim law. So these are the things which happen and which have been looked according to that, right? So here setting up of a new administration was done according to the individual religion also, right? Now, a major problem was that the Brahmin Pandits gave different interpretation of the local laws based on the different schools and Dharma Shastra. Now, to bring about the uniformity in 1775, 11 Pandits, as I say you right now, that 11 Pandits were asked to compile a digest of Hindu laws, and we translated this digest in English. Now previously, as we all know, that Britishers, when the judges, they don't understand our local language, so every rules and regulation, every law of individual community was being translated in English, so that it becomes very easier for the judge to give the judgment. By 1778, a code of Muslim law was also compiled for the benefit of the European judges. Under the Regulating Act of 1773, a Supreme Court was established while a Court of Appeal, the Sardar Nizam Adalat, was also set up at Calcutta. Right? Now, the principal figure in the Indian history was the collector. Collector was the Indian principal figure. That was the principal figure which was called as a collector. And as we all know that as the title itself suggests that his main job was to collect revenue. Collector itself means he have to collect the revenue and the taxes and maintain the law and order in the district with the help of the judges, police and the darogas. Now his office, the collectorate, became a new center of power and patronage that steadily replaced previous holders of the authority. Means this collector, they have the particular office that was called as a collectorate, and with the help of a police, with the help of darogas, with the help of judges, they have to take care of all this collecting revenues and rest of the stuff, right? Now the company army, we will see about the company army. Now the change occurred in the 18th century when the Mughal successor states like Awadh and Banaras started recruiting peasants into their armies and training them as a professional soldiers, right? They started training the people as a professional soldiers because we were not having that much equipment, we were not having that much arms and ammunition, armaments, right? So that was the reason they started recruiting the peasants itself and started training them as a professional soldiers. Now the East India Company adopted the same method when it began recruitment for its own army, which became to be known as a sepoy. Sepoy, we all know in our local language also we called as a sipai, right? Here it is sepoy. Army from an Indian word sipai meaning the soldier. The word itself comes to be known as a soldier. Now as a welfare technology changed from 1820s, the cavalry requirements for the company's army declined. This is because the British Empire was fighting in the Burma, Afghanistan and Egypt, where the soldiers were armed with the muskets and matchlocks, right? Muskets is a heavy gun used by infantry soldiers, the soldiers which are walking, or the land soldiers basically we call this that, right? So this is what we end up with our chapter. We will see with the notes and short questions and MCQs, fill in the blanks and rest of the things. Soon I'll come back with your notes and question answers. So go through this chapter in your test book. Go through each and every aspect. We have a glossary also. Complete your exercise in your test book. If you don't get, leave your comments. Whatever queries you have, you message me in the comments. I will reply to it for that. Right? Thank you. Have a nice day.